Welcome back to Quantum Conversations. My name is Sarah, and today my co-host Carrie Bennett and I are going to be making these complex topics of quantum biology and circadian biology understandable to the everyday person. Thank you so much for tuning in. We ask that if you are listening on audio only, that you take a moment to leave us up to a 5-star review. And if you're on YouTube, leave us a like, leave us a comment. It will help to get the show out to more people. And before we jump into today's topic, just a quick reminder to head down to the show notes and check out my free resources as well as Carrie's free resources. We also do have courses on a variety of topics. If you are hoping to dive deeper, Carrie and I both have practitioner courses available as well for anyone who wants to begin to bring these topics to their clients and help them to implement these strategies into their daily lives. So check those out. We also have a co-taught course called Quantum Fertility that is available that allows people and practitioners to work on their fertility using these principles of quantum biology and circadian biology. Again, thank you so much for listening or watching today's show, whichever one you are doing. And let's go ahead and jump into it now. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Quantum Conversations. Today, Carrie and I are going to talk about the elusive melanin.
Yes. Yeah, this word in the quantum biology sphere gets a lot of attention, and rightly so, right? Because I think the area where melanin is most notable is that it's what creates a tan, right? It's what pigments our skin deeper in response to sunlight exposure. So maybe we should start there with where melanin is located, both out, like on the surface of the skin and inside of the body, and then ways to potentially change the amount of melanin that we have in our tissues before we go into like the benefits or what this main researcher that we really want to highlight, Arturo Solas Herrera, has found in terms of, spoiler alert, how melanin by itself and melanin's interaction with light, specifically melanin surrounded by water and its interaction with light, and how that could actually be a huge source of energy in the body and in all creatures that contain melanin, which is, I think, almost most creatures on this planet contain melanin in their pigments. So yeah, let's go there.
Yeah. So how do we make melanin, right? It's UVA is really the primary place where our bodies make melanin, right?
Yeah. So we have these, there's a couple of different pathways that can get initiated, right? So there's what I would say the most local control of melanin production is in the skin, right? So we've got melanin in the skin. We also have it in parts of the central nervous system. So for example, something that's called the retinal pigmented epithelial lining or tract, if you will. So there's certain really key areas in in certain neurons or certain key areas in the brain, right? So there's parts of the brain, like specifically the substantia nigra, which is implicated in Parkinson's symptoms, that we have these deposits of melanin inside of the body. But the majority of the melanin that I think that we would be aware of is what's on the outside of our body. It's on the surface of our skin. And we have melanocytes there that are waiting to essentially sense ultraviolet light. And when they anticipate more ultraviolet light than the skin has been used to receiving, it will start to lay down or start the production of more melanin in the skin. And this is synced up, especially when the ultraviolet light that enters the eyes syncs and matches with the ultraviolet light that's touching the skin. This is behind the recommendations that Sarah and I give about, like, try not to wear sunglasses whenever possible, because we want the light that's entering the eyes to match the light that's entering the skin, because there is hypothalamic control as well, right? There's brain-based signaling happening as well. And I know Sarah knows all about that with the leptin, melanocortin type pathways. But that being said, when the light that enters the eyes and the skin matches, and the skin feels like they've reached sufficient light, and they want to layer down melanin, because melanin acts as a UV filter. We only want so much UV to penetrate our bodies, right? Like it's very much a titrated process, an adaptation process. And it doesn't mean that we can't absorb more and more of it, but depending on our initial skin pigmentation or the amount of melanin that we have in our skin, it will dictate how much ultraviolet light we can absorb without the skin saying, oh, no, let's layer down a little bit of tanning, in fact, a little bit of pigmentation as a supportive feature of protection, if you will.
Yes. Yeah. So what happens when we burn? What has happened there?
Typically, what happens when we burn is that the signaling for the eyes and the skin is a mismatch, right? And so when it's a mismatch, we oftentimes override or don't get the correct signaling to deposit melanin. And we also have another thing that we can deposit in our skin as a endogenous UV filter called urocanic acid.
Yes.
When those are synced, like through the eyes and the skin starts to layer those. And then when the skin has received enough UV light and is not going to upregulate those pathways any further, it actually will produce what's called an erythema response, which is through a localized production of histamine in the skin, which pinkens the skin. And this pinkening could look like pinkening, a true pink color, depending on your Fitzpatrick skin type, or it could feel like more of a warmth or even a rosy undertone, a warmer undertone to your skin, depending on what your Fitzpatrick skin type is. But it's there, right? And it's a local histamine release as a means of saying, okay, Carrie, you've sunned yourself enough, right? That's enough, right? And so that's the point where we pull ourselves into the shade, or I put on a hat, cover up, right? If I've reached that point. And so then if we override that, or it gets dysregulated because we don't have our eyes signaling matching our skin signaling, we're way less likely to be able to layer down the melanin, layer on the urocanic acid, and even induce a nice general histamine response. And instead, we're way more likely to go past those signals. And that's true. Yeah, sunburns do exist. They are a real thing, right? And it happens to do with not having adequate, essentially, layering on of those light frequencies, or a mismatch because we're wearing sunglasses.
Exactly. So it's all, and it all builds upon one another. So you don't just want to go out in the middle of the day. You want to make sure that you're preparing your skin and preparing your eyes and preparing your brain. It all kind of works together through going out at sunrise and kind of turning these things on, and then going at UVA. Again, that's kind of where melanin starts. But if you're going to go out in the middle of the day, UVB, which is available for only part of the year in some areas in these, more northern latitudes, then you want to do this in sequential order because of what you mentioned with urocanic acid. And we have these protective mechanisms in our skin to prevent us from burning like immensely, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And when we layer it on, and when we recognize this signaling, and when we sync the signals up in a sequential order where the light into our eyes matches our skin, the body adapts without issue, right? And if anything, the adaptation isn't just trying to avoid a sunburn. It's like, no, I want to adapt because I want to be able to assimilate as much light as is possible.
Yes.
Because of so many reasons that we talk about, but specifically today, we're going to talk about melanin.
Yeah, which there's so many amazing benefits to melanin production. And like you said, it's not just on the skin. That's where everyone thinks it is just on the surface of the skin, but it's also, like you said, in the nervous system and the brain. So it goes far beyond that. So now we know kind of how to safely make melanin, right?
On the outside, we also make it with cold exposure on the inside.
Yeah.
Right?
Can you talk about that pathway a little bit? Because I know that people will ask.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and this is fascinating because I do have several people in my community. And also, I think Dr. Sarah, too, is a prime example of this. And people who have done a lot of cold plunging all winter long and have maintained melanin pigmentation on their skin because essentially they don't need to lose their tan, if you will, as a means of pulling in melanin from the surface to potentially put it in the central nervous system or in the substantia nigra of the brain. So it's a lot easier to maintain a tan when you do cold exposure because of the melanin upregulation pathways that you get. And so, cold, one of the ways that it can do that is because cold in and of itself can cause us to make more ultraviolet light.
Is it
inside of our
it's
bodies.
UVC light, correct?
Yeah, it's a very intense version of ultraviolet light. And what that allows to have happen is that allows then that UVC, it's inside of our bodies that can also stimulate those melanin production pathways in the brain, that neuromelanin, if you will. So cold, I always tell people, if you want to keep it simple, it's never as simple as this. But if you want to keep it simple, cold helps to keep or make melanin inside. Sunlight helps you make melanin outside on your skin.
I like that for the purpose of the conversation, to keep it simple for people. So basically what you're saying, and I saw this when Sarah came to stay with us, it got to be December and she still had like a ridiculous tan, but she was also going out into my cold plunge. Like she was going like multiple times a day. Later on, she told me that it made her nervous system kind of crash. It was too much. But I noticed, I'm like, how is she still so tan? There's, the UVB is very, very, it's pretty much gone and she's not really laying out. And so I thought that was super interesting that she was maintaining this beautiful tan even in the winter time here.
Yeah, absolutely. Prime example of that. Again, like I said, a couple members of my community have noticed the exact same thing. So it's a way that you can maintain a tan and maintain melanin production in spite of not having adequate UV index to cause it to be produced via those skin pathways.
Exactly.
I would love then to introduce people to Dr. Arturo Solas Herrera, who has published dozens of articles on this molecule called melanin, right? Because what he was understanding was that, wait a second, he was very confused because he was studying a blind population and was just looking at, energy production pathways. And he said, wait a second, ATP cannot account for what's happening in this particular eye tissue that I'm looking at. So there has to be an alternative way that this tissue is literally getting energy, and helping support mitochondrial health. And he started to dive into melanin. And what he found subsequently from that moment was that, and he always calls it like the unexpected capability of melanin to dissociate the water molecule and make energy, right? Something like that in every one of his titles, whether he's looking at it from eye health to Alzheimer's disease and everything in between. And so what we now know through his research, thankfully, is that melanin, just like all other molecules in the body, are surrounded by a hydration shell of water. But melanin is a dark pigment, and dark pigments absorb all light or most light frequencies, right? And he found that when melanin absorbs photons of light, that absorption causes the water surrounding the melanin molecule to dissociate, which is the fancy way of saying split apart. And it splits apart to form molecular hydrogen and molecular oxygen. And the molecular hydrogen is what he is hypothesizing is that the molecular oxygen is literally a substitute in certain tissues for the oxygen that we breathe, or it can substitute.
Interesting.
Which is why he has stated in some research articles that he believes that certain tissues can rely 90% in terms of their energy on this particular pathway, and not necessarily on needing to breathe in the oxygen and eat the food, right? The modern way that we view metabolism happening. Now, you and I, we think that there's more nuance to it than that, right? Earthing and other ways that we can get electrons, if you will.
Right.
And understanding that exclusions on water. There's a lot of nuance that I think we bring into it, but I love the fact that he really a very outside the box thinker in terms of his research, but really doing extensive research on this, his hypothesizing that 90% of a given tissue can have its energy production from simply absorbing photonic energy and allowing that water around the melanin to make molecular hydrogen, which is an electron donor, and molecular oxygen. So let me do one more thing before you chime in here, because those are the inputs to the mitochondria, right? This is what's essential to know. Mitochondria need, number one, they need electrons to get donated to the electron transport chain. Great, we have that because the hydrogen in and of itself has electrons associated with it. And this process actually does it. When it splits, it generates electrons. And so that hydrogen will donate its electrons. Actually, there's two hydrogens, more depending on how much water splits, but will donate its electrons to the electron transport chain. Perfect. Now that's a naked hydrogen, meaning it's been stripped of its electron. It is a proton. So it can translocate into the inner membrane space and create mitochondrial membrane potential. That mitochondrial membrane potential is what needs to build up to drive ATP synthesis. And the water is what goes to step 4 of the electron transport chain that combines with hydrogen and oxygen and electrons to make water, right? And so it's like a self-fulfilling cycle right there, all because melanin has this capability. And melanin also, it doesn't just do that. It has the ability not only to split the water molecule if it's needed for energy or metabolism, it can reform. Right. So it's not just, okay, it's split and now we just got a bunch of molecular hydrogen and molecular oxygen. No, it can reform as well, which is essential in terms of creating a complete loop, like a really almost like a feedback mechanism that's happening inside of the body.
Okay. So that's why you may not need to supplement with molecular hydrogen, right? If you can get your body to make enough melanin on its own, correct?
It's entirely possible if you can have adequate amounts of melanin and adequate amounts of melanin, adequate amounts of light exposure to split that water molecule around the melanin to give it to the tissue. The issue then becomes, and I don't think the research is there yet, is that if someone's already experiencing mitochondrial dysfunction, is this pathway always going to be enough and available and for people to get to that next level of healing? Not necessarily. That's where I think, and what's interesting is as obviously when we were preparing for the podcast with Greg, and I did a deep dive into molecular hydrogen. I've done these deep dives here and there. And so it's an intriguing pathway. And what you find with molecular hydrogen is it impacts the same things that you find with this melanin pathway. It increases mitochondrial membrane potential. It can donate electrons to the electron transport chain. It can act as a selective antioxidant, and you'll see increases in ATP synthesis with molecular hydrogen. And it actually can stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis, mitophagy, right? Basically creating new or healthier versions of mitochondria in a tissue. So I think that was almost one of our built-in ways, if we were living in one with nature, to do exactly that. I do feel like there is a therapeutic benefit to molecular hydrogen because I don't think we are living in an ideal environment.
We're not. People, and they're so surrounded by things like non-native EMF. I'm sure that's disruptive of melanin production, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That can, and anything that essentially depletes the water and or increases oxidative stress is enough to disrupt that pathway. And you can imagine then the mitochondrial dysfunction that ensues simply because we're overproducing the hydroxyl radical or these free radicals in response to non-native EMFs. So it's exactly it, right? But it's also why when you have a leopard in the wild, that leopard is not going to be affected because it's always in contact with Earth's electrons. It has adequate melanin. It's in the natural light. So it's doing these processes naturally because it's in a much more natural environment than we are now living in.
Right. Exactly. All right. So
it's energy. I'm just saying it's energy, right? We have to, and so he calls it human photosynthesis, which is legitimately, no one ever thought that we would have adequate capabilities to literally capture energy and split a water molecule, which is what plants do. That's how they do photosynthesis to make glucose. It's how they grow, right? And yes, we can eat that glucose and reverse the process by eating it. And we can, instead of plants making glucose and oxygen, we will breathe in the oxygen and eat the glucose, and we'll make water, ATP, right? We'll reverse it basically, and carbon dioxide. But that being said, we also can do not just from eating that we can reverse it. We can actually do photosynthesis ourselves on the surface of the skin and inside of the body as well. And so it just, again, feels to me like a very liberating way to view my health, as opposed to like going back to the old school of let me count my calories, track my macros, just obsess about food. And we talk about this a lot because I think you and I came from that paradigm of how should I eat? What macros? Let me test this number. Let me, see if I cut my calories this way. And we just, it can become obsessive, and it can be very incomplete when it comes to optimizing the health or optimizing your physique or whatever you're looking to do. And so that's why it's nice to bring into the equation these other aspects of energy and health. I think in order to really give people opportunities to gather energy beyond just consuming food.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you and I were kind of talking about this before we started recording. It's like, me kind of going through this leptin practitioner course that I'm doing. I think it's just such a huge missing piece for people. And that's why you and I really want to educate people and allow them to understand the body has more than one way of making energy. And melanin is absolutely fascinating in the scheme of this because it can do so much. It provides the body with energy. There's other benefits, right? It can help the body to sequester heavy metals. Is that correct as well?
Yeah, so it does. It has a binding capability. So not only people, when most people think heavy metals, they think like mercury, lead, those sorts of things. But you can also get dysregulated iron, right? Oxidized iron.
Yes.
Dysregulated copper. Melanin does have the ability to also sequester those and hold those where they're no longer damaging in a tissue. And there's even just some behind the scenes dialogue with clinicians who say that they truly believe that things like cherry angiomas, which are little deposits of melanin on the surface of the skin, more of a reddish pigmentation, it would be higher in a type of melanin potentially called pheomelanin, right? A different pigment of melanin. As a way to sequester toxins or pull toxins from the inside of the tissues where they could be more detrimental and hold them on the surface of the skin where they're not going to necessarily negatively impact, say, the lungs, the heart, the liver, the kidneys, the brain, things like that.
Very interesting.
Super interesting.
Yeah, it is. And just the implications of it are, I think, pretty far reaching. One question I get often is when I'm out in the sun, I get these little white spots all over my skin. And there's so many different, I know you get that one too. There's so many different ideas about it. What are your thoughts? Just because I'm sure we'll get a comment or question about that.
I'm sorry, people. I don't know. That's the thing. It's like white spots, dark spots, freckles, whatever it is, liver spot. I mean, there's so many
Liver
different things.
spots, age spots. Yeah.
It's hard. It's really hard. I think I have zero training in dermatology, right? I have zero training in skin assessments. So I just can't say. I can't say. But what I have seen is that even in what's fascinating to me is even in more potentially extreme cases of depigmentation of the skin, where either you get the white in such like vitiligo, what they're giving vitiligo patients in the dermatological clinic is UVB light. Like, they're just basically giving them really strong ultraviolet light. And so there has to be something about needing to reestablish melanogenesis in those. So it could just be that we're either not getting adequate light for the body, or maybe the body is pulling that melanin inside for some reason, right? You said, heavy metals, iron, oxidized iron, things like that. Again, this is all speculation and a crapshoot because there's very few people doing the research that we want to see in this. But as clinicians, I can't wait for people to do the research that I want to see. I have to try to work through this and the applications as safely as possible to get people healthy.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard everything from like, oh, it's deuterium depletion. That's what's happening with the white spots as your deuterium is coming out. Vitiligo, like it's all theory though. Like, I don't think anybody really, really knows. It's fungus, it's this, it's parasites. I'm like, speculation, I don't think we fully know, right?
We don't know. We don't know. It is speculation. And listen, also, this is a thing too. And these are fair questions, but even things like the way that you pigment your skin, a lot of it has to do with your Fitzpatrick skin type. Yes. Some people lay down melanin very evenly.
Easy. Yeah.
Some people it's more patchy, right? Yep. Or some people get freckles on various parts of their body as a melanin response. So it's just like, that is a very much a case-by-case individualized basis, oftentimes due to your Fitzpatrick skin type.
Exactly. And that's why you and I talk so much about like the layering on and how you have to go slowly with this. And we did a whole episode, which I post in my private group. I think I just posted it yesterday, of someone who was like, I was laying out and now I got red. And I'm like, well, I didn't tell you to do that. Here's the episode Carrie and I did talking about like the nuances of sun exposure, because you and I are not the kind of people that are telling people like, oh, you can go and spend like, 10 hours out in the sun and that's totally fine. you and I are a little bit more conservative with that, especially talking to a broad group of people, that you do have to be careful and you do have to kind of like layer it on gradually, because we talk about melanin and all these benefits, but you can definitely overdo it and cause too much ROS in the body, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So it's all about, it's all about dosing things, right? In the
Mm-hmm.
same way that you could overconsume water and have a
Mm-hmm.
fatal reaction,
Right.
if I sat in front of my Spurdy D lamp, I would have third-degree
Oh
burns.
gosh. I've done that before. Like even at the 5 minute, like, and I had been out in the sun all summer, and that thing, I literally had like bubbled up like spots on my back from that thing. It was it was awful. It was like a delayed burn too. It didn't happen until like that night. And I was like, oh my gosh, something is really hurting. And I felt like I had a fever, and it was a delayed burn from the disparity. And I had been out in the sun like all summer. Like I had a really nice solar callus. And so, yeah. And that's another example of why we don't necessarily just want to take one ancillary wavelength and expose our bodies to it, that there's, red and near infrared and UVA and UV, like they're supposed to be multiple frequencies together, not just necessarily like one, because it's a confusing signal for the body, right?
It's a confusing signal. And so the question that we sometimes get here is, well, what about red light therapy? And the difference is that red light therapy is red and near infrared, and those are longer wavelengths of light. Mm-hmm. And so to understand what that means in terms of the energy behind it, there's less energy, if you will, in those wavelengths. Whereas ultraviolet is a shorter wavelength of light, and it packs a punch. Yep. And that's okay, right? That's okay when we utilize it in the right exposures and the adaptations and all that stuff. But it also means that, like you said, unopposed ultraviolet light on the skin for 5 minutes, when you might not have ever had that intensity at that distance, voila, right? Unfortunately, that was the consequences, right? Yeah. So, thankfully it's a good story now for you to be able to share with people, to say like, listen, we're not talking about, going from Michigan in March to the equator and then thinking that I could lay out all day long, right? That's just not going to happen.
No, that's a really bad idea. And you and I are big fans of like a hat or covering up, going in the shade. Like, I think that's really the best strategy for people that are really trying to be gradual about this and do this a safe way, is just like get out, Yeah. And you can still get near infrared in the shade, right? It'll bounce off of trees. Yeah.
Scott Zimmerman's work. Yeah. It bounces off of green things. It's reflected off of greenery. So, same. Absolutely. Right. Twofold. Number one, I want to be outside as much as possible. So I'm very aware of my sun signals when I've received enough sunlight. And yes, I have become the queen of cute beach hats and cover-ups. Okay.
Visor,
just because, right? You're the visors. I'm still the beach hat. But I can't wait to see your visor someday. I think we joked about it one time. Like I was like, well, maybe I could take my beach hat and just cut the hole to get like the light touching my hair.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to get, the light up here.
So if ever you see someone on a beach in Florida with a hole in the top of her hat,
it's scary.
It's me.
Trying to get infrared to the brain.
That's right. So that being said, yeah, like I think it's a smart thing to be able to know when your skin has received enough light, and you can still get the benefits in the shade or with the cover up on. So stay outside, because the light signaling through the eyes is really amazing too.
Primary. Yeah.
And there's don't you feel like there's I feel like there's certain skin on my body that can handle light more.
Oh, my legs.
Tops of my shoulders, not necessarily. My chest, not necessarily. But my legs.
Belly and my legs.
All day. All day. Right.
Because a lot of times the way I lay out now is, because we're just starting to get stronger UV. I think it's getting up to like a 5 and a 6 now here in Georgia, here in March. So sometimes I'll just there's like parts of the yard I can lay and have shade. And so I'll shade and kind of lay like that and just go from like here all the way down. Chest and belly, but I'm covering up these areas like, that are a little bit more sensitive to sunlight, and they're going to, show more, signs of skin damage, sun damage. So I usually keep
There's
those
nothing
things.
vain about that. I think
Oh,
it's a very valid thing that people ask when
yeah.
it comes to sun exposure.
Yeah, because you can, I think you can photo age your skin. I don't care what anybody says. That's the hill I'll die on, is like, yeah, you can. You absolutely can. Because I know the first year that I started really implementing these things, I was kind of taking advice of somebody who was like, you can never overdo the sun and it's the best thing for you. And I was like, great. And I did notice like my face, like, definitely did some photo aging just in that summer, because I was just like, okay, I'm just doing this, and lesson learned. So now I'm like, all right, let me put it in the shade, and the rest of my body gets a nice tan, and I'm getting all the benefits. So you don't have to go to the extremes in order to get benefits from this information.
Yeah, exactly. And I think because the face and typically hands, neck, right, face, that's naturally just going to get a lot more sun exposure in general, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't always need to have equal amounts of time in those areas, right? Exactly. But I do, my body, when I'm laying out where I want to receive the sunlight, is basically my breasts, my abdomen, my legs, my back, right? The back of my legs, all that just feels like I don't get as much light naturally, as much as I try to wear like little skorts are my go-to in the summer, right?
Yeah.
My mom uniform, as my kids call it, my skorts and tank tops. I try as much as I try to do that, it still doesn't get as much light as I want. So I naturally, when I do lay out, I want to focus on those areas.
Definitely. So what else do we want to cover with melanin? I feel like we've hit a lot of really important things. What else?
It's instant. The effect is instantaneous.
Yeah.
So I think that's important to know too. While you might need to, in order to make vitamin D, you need a certain amount of time in the UV light, depending on where you live, the UV index, and how much skin is being exposed. So that will have to build up, right? If you want to reach a certain amount in a given sun session. Also, to deposit more melanin, it means you essentially have to expose yourself to more and more sunlight, right? Because then your body will start to layer more and more melanin pigmentation into your skin. But to get the energizing effects, that's instantaneous.
Yes.
Melanin absorbs it right away. So this is why we say, this is why you and I are like, oh, I got 3 minutes. Let me pee, and then I'm going to go lay out for a second, right? I'm just going to go get, because we know that even with me, 2 minutes of me standing in the backyard, oftentimes I got like a chair, like I just, like this, right? I lift everything up, and it's like, I know that I'm getting something
energized.
Right. I'm just getting something from it. It's not like I need to be out there for a certain amount of time to derive any benefit from that particular pathway. Same thing with building UV or building easy water. And I'm like, easy water, electrons, melanin, right? And so little bouts can really be beneficial if you only have those throughout the day. And I encourage people to do that, and to not think that, oh, well, I don't have 20 minutes to lay out, so I'm just going to skip it right now.
The same thing with your structuring your water. It pretty much happens instantaneous when it's outside in the sun. You don't need to let your water sit out there for 2 hours in the middle of the sun, in the middle of the day. Like, it just put it out there, structure, you're good,
Yeah, totally. Or in the moonlight, same thing. Yeah, absolutely same thing. I love moonlight water. And do you want to know what the coolest part? Not even the coolest part. All of this stuff is cool in my opinion, but Dr. Herrera figured out how to generate basically a perpetual battery utilizing only light, melanin, and water. It's like, I wish every researcher on the planet who wants to find clean sources of energy would understand this. And not only that, melanin, I honestly think that melanin has an innate intelligence inside of the molecule itself that goes way beyond what I want to talk about during this particular conversation. But that being said, melanin, he's actually had a battery operating for, I think, approximately 10 years, simply because he's got a source of melanin, he's got water, and he's got a light on it. And because the melanin will, when it breaks the water molecule, it breaks 2 water molecules typically at a time, that generates 4 electrons in the process. Those are energized electrons that's electricity, right? So he's generating electricity, but the water can reform. So it's not like he needs to have any additional inputs into it. It's just this self-sustaining battery using light melanin in water. I mean, it's insane, right? Like
Genius.
it's
Yeah.
genius. And when you
Yeah.
know these things, you like when I learn these things, I ask myself, like, why are we doing it in a certain way in this world? Like, why aren't we taking a look at this type of information and just
Right.
maybe thinking outside the box and trying to do something a little bit differently? So
I agree.
now
What
it's not the
else?
strongest battery on the planet, but it works. It does
It
move small
works.
motors. Yeah. So
Right, exactly. And we're so quick to like jump to these other sources. Like, why not try what's natural, what's available to us, especially when it comes to our own energy production and the way people struggle with appetite and energy? It's like, just go get these little hits, these little bursts of
Yep.
sunlight, especially if you're somebody who I've been kind of experimenting with this with different community members of like, they have the evening appetite. Well, first of all, fix the blue light environment, get off the TV and the
huge.
screens, wear your blue blockers. That's huge. But also, if you can go outside, there's UVA light all day, like get some afternoon sun on your skin. And I find that that is really, really helping people with that evening appetite, where they're a little bit more likely to want to kind of snack and graze in the evening if they can control the blue light environment, but also those doses and hits of UV light in the afternoon.
UV light, earthing. Yep.
Yeah, it's helping with the appetite suppression. And again, I always say it's kind of more like an adaptogenic. So if you need to be eating more, right, that I think that the light inputs can help you with that. But most people are not in that boat that I'm working with.
I love that description of adaptogenic. I think that's exactly it. Because if I've been outside, let's say doing a hike or something more intense, right? My appetite won't be suppressed. My body will, yes, I'll have gotten the free energy, but I'm going to come home and be like, yes, I need to fuel myself. Whereas if I'm just doing a casual hangout at the beach, with the family, maybe just playing in the sand a little bit, nothing crazy, that has a big appetite suppressing effect for me.
Yeah.
Right. And so I love how you describe that adaptogenic aspect of that. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's how I've kind of been just describing it in the framework of like light and leptin is like, this is, if you've got low leptin, this can help. If you've got elevated leptin, this can help. Just right. It's not going to hurt anything. So yeah, I think this is a fascinating thing for people to take a look at and just understand. Like we did that whole episode of like only 1/3 of your body's energy should come from food. This is really where the whole light portion of the equation comes from, right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
A big part of it.
A huge part of it. I mean, not to mention like the, I guess, downstream ramifications of light in building exclusion zone water, and that as an energy source. If anyone wants to read the article where this is referenced in one of the articles from Arturo, it would be going to an article called Beyond Mitochondria. What would the energy of the cell be, or what would be the energy source of the cell? Something like that. And maybe I could find it and link it.
Yeah.
But look up Arturo Solas Herrera, Beyond Mitochondria, energy source of the cell. And he'll talk about how it's not even conclusive in all of the biochemistry literature exactly what's happening with things like the Krebs cycle and so even though we feel those are like fundamental truths in biochemistry, even then it's like people have just kind of said, man, we're going to kind of overlook these discrepancies. And he's saying, well, by the way, what about the fact that we really believe that 90% of the energy requirements of certain cells can be fulfilled in this particular pathway? If because you and I know this, we're like, well, then I'm going to optimize.
Right. Why would I not?
Melanin, right. And optimize that energy source, because it's just thinking outside of the typical box of where we consume calories, those calories become energy. That energy then makes ATP, and ATP is also energy. It just doesn't fit my paradigm anymore.
Yeah, agree. I that's my whole like practitioner course. I'm trying to get people to move to that. And that's where I feel like so many people are getting it twisted, and the health and fitness and diet industry is like, they're just so hyper focused on the food and the macros and the tracking and the steps. And it's like, do you even realize that if you optimize these light pathways, and you don't even have to understand them, like you don't need to know all the stuff that Carrie knows in order for it to work.
You don't.
Good luck if you want to, because she's just like always going to be blowing my mind. But now you don't even have to really understand it for it to work like that. It's just the body has these brilliant, brilliant ways of gathering energy. And it's not, if you are capitalizing on those, you are going to see a big upgrade. I'm like, that's literally why I'm convinced that here I am about to turn 45 and I've never been this lean, not even in my 20s, really. Like, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm just really capitalizing on the light exposure.
Yeah.
I'm not even really doing that much cold exposure right now, just because I haven't not felt like it. But just, the light exposure, capitalizing on that, it's like my metabolism is just like super, super fueled,
Yeah, totally, totally. And so I hope that inspires people. I feel the same way. I feel like I'm going to be 43 this year. I feel the same thing. It's metabolism is easy. Now that the light environment has been dialed in for X number of years, it just feels really, really good. It works. It absolutely works.
Yeah.
The thing too, I think if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I buy into it, right? I'll start doing this. Great. That's great. You don't have to. If you want to dive into the research, please do. And for practitioners listening to this, you'll find, just like I do with each client, there is a certain threshold of science that they need in order to buy in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But they need to understand enough of it. It's not often enough to be like, because if I were just to tell someone go outside, it's healthy. People are like, yeah, okay. I'm going to still count my macros. Right. But if you tell them all the other things you know about the light and what it does and how it optimizes circadian rhythm and energy production and exclusions on water and melanin, and if you tell them all of these things, then it makes the light way more significant. And so you kind of have to figure out what's the threshold of knowledge that someone needs in order to get the motivation to do these things.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I try to do in my 21-day program. Cause I'm just like, I went back through it recently to just see if there's anything I wanted to add. I'm like, oh, I know so much more now than when I originally created this. And I was like, no, I don't need to make this more complicated for anybody. Like that's why I'm making a practitioner course now for anybody who wants to get more complicated. But I'm seeing so many people have success with this program, and we're not even talking about melanin to this depth and to this level. And it's like, you don't necessarily need to understand it all. You just kind of need to know it exists. You don't need to know all the different pathways, but you need to know this is like legitimately a thing, and it will work if you do it. But don't feel discouraged if you don't want to dive into all the research papers and go through those and comb through those. It's there if you want to, but it's not necessary for it to work.
No, that's exactly it. So it's just if whatever most motivates you to understand this enough to get outside, and not fear the ultraviolet light, because it could be very healing.
Oh yeah. And we didn't even get into, because this is a melanin episode, we didn't even get into like nitric oxide and blood pressure lowering and all the amazing things it can do for the heart. It's just like, it's so far reaching, just beyond like metabolism and energy production, in framework of the metabolism. It's energy production for the entire body, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. Glucose sensitivity, blood pressure, blood flow. So many things that would take way too long to go into right now. But yeah, just know that I think we've been really myopic in our understanding of UV light, and there's so much more than what we've been led to believe.
Agree. Awesome. Well, you've got free resources in the show notes. So do I. So if people want to dive deeper, check those out. And this has been fun. We'll look forward to chatting again next week.